Welcome to Braid Girls, everybody. I'm super excited, but you will notice that our braid girl is not a braid girl. He is a brilliant gardener, and he is the first man that we've had on the show. So this is super exciting. This is Jake.
Hello, everyone.
And he is the Ontario Gardener. Did I say it right?
Yep, just spell it as it sounds, the Ontario Gardener on YouTube. And the next best place to find stuff is if you all do Facebook. You do Facebook, and it's called Eagle Valley Produce, all spelled exactly how you would think. And that's where I post stuff about the market and most of my update pictures.
And if you don't follow him on Instagram, you are missing out. I think I subscribed to you a long time ago, but then I found you on Instagram too, and his Instagram pictures are inspirational. So Jake, tell us what it is you do as far as your gardening, your market gardening, who you are, what setbacks you have, just anything you want to tell us about, and I'm just going to let you kind of have the floor.
Sure. Well, basically, the whole kind of culmination of getting to 2016 started back in 1999, back in southeastern Pennsylvania. That's where I'm originally from. And I was 15. My dad said, "Get a job," and I said, "Find me one." So I started working at a nursery. We did plants. Herbs and whatnot, herbs and, shrubs and flowers and whatnot. So that's where it all started 15, 16 years ago. And fast forward to 2011, I'm up in Canada here. I'm just north of Toronto in Ontario here. And my wife and I had the opportunity to get a farm. The main focus was horses. My gardening was going to be kind of my hobby, which it still is. And we got the equipment, the whole deal. And if you look back at some of my videos from 2011, I jumped right in, kind of threw caution into the wind, and I was quite happy with what the results were. But looking at things now, it's like, geez, I was really kind of, very beginner. And as the years went on, 3 seasons ago, 2014, I decided to grow for a farmer's market. And I had no idea how to do marketing. And the biggest issue with me was not growing, it's what to charge people and how to talk to people to make them buy your product over the next 2 or 3 other people. Thankfully, the first market I did, this is again in 2014 season, was a nice way of putting it, was terrible. So it was kind of a good and a bad way to get my foot in the door. The market was very small. There was maybe 8 or 10 vendors. It was on a Wednesday night, like 3 to 7 or something like that. And it was in the middle of nowhere. It was at a location where everybody in the area knew, but it wasn't near anything. And where I'm at, when I say we deal with horses, we're in horse country. We're in farm country. I have a neighbor across the street, and my next neighbor is probably close to a mile down the road. And wow, that's pretty close. So that market really kind of got my juices flowing, if you will, about how to actually do a good market. So I went through the whole season, grew what I grew, and sold what I sold, and talked to people, and kind of got that. I'm not a very not sociable person, but I like to stay at home. I like to do things at home, and I don't go out very much and do that. If I kind of have to, I do. So anyway, so after that season, which again, we're still back in 2014, I knew I wanted to do markets again, but I knew I wasn't going to go back to that one. I didn't make very much money as far as just a gross kind of income. I probably, for say 20 weeks, I probably didn't clear more than $1,500, which is not very good for, at that time, I didn't have greenhouses or anything, so I didn't have a huge cost, but it was time. Mm-hmm. As anybody else that knows gardening or homesteading or any of that stuff, it's very labor intensive, and you don't necessarily pay yourself. And if you'd factor in what you would pay yourself, you probably aren't making much money at all. So you have to be doing something that you like. Last year, I found another market. Still on the small side, there was about 12 vendors, but it was 5 or 6 years old, a little bit farther away as far as a drive, maybe 15, 20 miles. And that got my first taste of a real market. But at the end of that the end of the 2014 season, I had a little bit of experience growing in my first hoop house. I'll touch on that in a little bit. And I knew that I really needed to focus on having early crops. by the end of the year, I kind of looked back as far as what I made. I kept a little book. I don't have my little book with me. Yes, here. This was one from last year. And basically all I did is every week I went through and wrote down what I took and what I sold. Not dollar amounts, but what I sold. And at the end of the year, it gave me a good indication what people like, what people don't like, and I could have a rough estimate. Now we're in 2015. Last year, I probably grossed probably 3,000 to 4,000. That's probably a low number. But of course, I always want to go bigger.
Right.
And Julie mentioned earlier about my greenhouses. The first one, the long one, which there's videos on my YouTube channel about kind of how I built both of these. And I'm by no means an expert, but the knowledge that I took from back in the 90s about when we put up greenhouses, I kind of used that with materials that I have up here. The issue for me, I guess, is like overall with market gardens is I never have enough stuff. I always want to have more. And the problem with that is you have to be able to sell it.
Right.
But you know, with that, you still want to have a full table for the whole day. So it's very difficult. It's like you got to have products that people want, but you have to have enough different products to get people to come back week after week. Like right now, I'm at the end of my greens. I do mixed greens bags, 5 or 6 different greens, lettuces. That's coming to an end. And there are people that have come every week to get one. But the problem is now they're done. It's gotten too warm. So now I got to focus on some other crops. And as far as this year, and we're moving along a little bit here, as far as this year goes, I had issues with bugs. The previous 2 seasons, I had issues with, I have an ongoing arthritis and issues with herniated discs in my back. And I usually get flare-ups every spring. So the previous 2 seasons, I had back issues, but the garden did well. This year, I feel good, knock on wood, but the garden is suffering with bugs. Now, that's the biggest struggle for me. And it's not necessarily a struggle, I guess you would say, just with what you're losing. It's a mental struggle. It's very depressing when you think about the time it takes to grow your seedlings. I do my own seedlings instead of direct seeding. I find that works better. So say you're growing a cucumber plant or a zucchini plant for 3-4 weeks. Looks great. You put it in the ground. Next morning you come out and there's bugs all over it and it's half eaten. That's very discouraging. And I kind of have really, you know, it's part of gardening. You have bugs. I don't grow organic, quotation certified organic. I try to grow as organic as possible, which previous years it was great because I didn't have to spray for bugs or anything. So I could grow as organic as far as no pesticides as possible. But this year I had to use a couple products, some kind of just soapy water, something that's considered organic, I guess. I don't really know, but that's not commercial and still having bug issues. So kind of, you know, fast forwarding from, you know, years ago to now, right now I'm having bug problems. And, you know, it's difficult as far as a gardener, as most of you know, to deal with bugs or deal with weeds. I'm a person, I don't like weeding, so I use weed barrier and this and that.
So the questions that I have, because I've seen how beautiful it is, and honestly, I was kind of blown away. I don't remember if you had a picture on Instagram or what, but you showed the length of your greenhouse, and I thought, oh my gosh, one man is able to keep up. First off, this is a huge structure. Did you build it by yourself? How much did it cost to build your greenhouses, and how many square feet do they cover?
Well, the first greenhouse, which if you check back on my videos, it'd be the fall of 2013. So 2.5 years ago, I wanted a greenhouse, as I mentioned earlier, because I wanted to grow stuff inside. My lettuce and stuff. Lettuce and your greens are so easy to have bugs attack them. Like you plant them, like the next day they're gone, or rodents or rabbits. Luckily, I don't have issues with animals yet. Up here where we're at, we don't really have much woodlands around here, so the rabbits and this and that, they're not plentiful here, which is a good thing. But anyway, I wanted to do a greenhouse, and you know, you can go online and buy kits. You can buy ones at your hardware store that are like 6x8, glass, plexiglass, and they're thousands of dollars just for something like that. And I'm saying, well, that's not going to cut it. So I kind of went online, different places. I get a lot of my products. I'll give a little plug here from Vessie's and Johnny's. That's where I get most of my seedlings, most of my seeds from. They're very common.
My mom really likes Johnny's.
Yeah, they're very common, well-known seed suppliers. I use others, but those are the majority of the ones. And Johnny's sells pipe benders. It's basically just a jig to bend straight pipes into the size hoop that you need. So I picked up one of that, and then I make Excel spreadsheets as far as how to get cost of things. I go online to say Home Depot and then transfer the numbers to my spreadsheet, and then you fill in what you need, this, that, the other thing, and then you get a rough estimate. Plastic, you find a supplier near you. I mean, in the States, they're probably everywhere. You ship, countrywide. Up here, things are a lot less plentiful, so it makes it even harder. But I found a company, told them what I'm looking for. They said this is the price. Now, as far as costs for that greenhouse, which all it was just 12 feet wide by 80 feet long. If I'd redo it, I wouldn't do it 80 feet. I'd do it maybe 60 feet. And the reason is because it's so difficult to ventilate without having roll-up sides.
Oh, okay. That makes sense.
So for the cost of the hoops, so if you're doing 80 feet long, you're using 21 hoops. You put them 4-foot center. And, it's a lot of math as far as that goes. Then you have your top purlin. And then you have baseboards, which are 2x6s that run the length, and then across the fronts. And then each end, I put doors, and I had some older windows and this and that. But a rough estimate of what that costs, just the structure, no raised beds, no power, no water, nothing but the plastic, the wood, and the pipes, I'd say you're probably close to $1,800, $2,000. It all, again, those numbers vary based on your location and what you can find.
And did that include the plastic?
That included the plastic. The plastic, I believe the sheet that I got was about, I think, 22 or 24 feet wide. Because when you have a 12-foot wide greenhouse, the jig that I had, you use two 10-foot lengths of chain link top rail. So that's 20 feet long, and then you have what hangs down where you attach your baseboard. So you always have to allow for extra. Different greenhouse styles, the plastic, some of you have a peak, some are more of a flat dome. I mean, it all varies, but you just do some simple math, you can figure out how much you need, and then you contact your supplier. But yeah, the plastic, I believe, was around maybe $300, $350 shipped here. And that was local, so it was maybe $20, $30 shipping, including the tax. So let's say $300, $400 for that length, and that's a lot. But then again, your raised beds, that costs money mostly for your lumber.
Right.
You can source your soil for free, or what I use is a mix of horse compost and soil. I just dig a pit out. I have 2 pits just down below the garden. I dig my soil and mix it together. So that was free. But your lumber, a 2x6 16-foot board is over $10. So the costs really add up. And
well, to give you perspective for those of you who will be watching this, we have our greenhouse that we got came as a kit. And the reason that we got it was because it was supposed to be really, really tough for snow or intense heat and wind. But it cost us $3,400 for a 12 by 24 greenhouse. And so he built a 12 by 80 greenhouse for half the cost of what it costs for us to do ours.
Yeah, as far as your costs vary, a kind of, not necessarily industry standard, but a standard is roughly your hoops are 4 foot on center. Now, if you have a very high wind area or a very, very snow loady area, or, you have those type of conditions, you can put them at 3 foot, or you can put them, you can put them any distance less than 4 foot. Obviously, the more hoops you have, the stronger you'll have your ceiling, because the plastic won't be able to sag and tear as easily. Now, fortunately, where I'm in a very high wind zone, but where I'm at, we get a lot of snow, but because of the winds, the snow just blows right off.
Okay.
And I get it. I get drifts in both ends at the doors because it's flat. So the wind comes and it just dumps it off. That's just how the wind with the snow, but depending on where you're at, again, sourcing materials, you can buy kits up here that are more expensive, but they're likely, well, I shouldn't say likely, they are built stronger.
Okay.
You know, if you have a 1 1.25 inch top rail chain link fence that you can easily bend with your hands, that's not as strong as a 1x3, you know, channel or whatever you're gonna call it, that's bent on a machine. It's not as strong. So your cost can really jump around. If you live in, say, a town where you have fences around your yard, you can build them out of PVC pipe, your hoops.
Right.
Because
you don't have that wind tunnel that's just hitting right at you.
With the wind, you don't. I mean, the snow is hit or miss depending on where you live. But yeah, you don't have to build it quite as strong. Now, one thing I will mention is if you're in a high wind area, and this is my opinion, is you have to have a good anchoring system.
Yeah.
Now, especially the longer and the bigger you go, the more, not complex, more heavy duty. So each of my hoops has 2 ends, obviously. So there's 21 hoops, so there's 42 ends. Each one of those ends is in a pipe that's in the ground 2.5 feet. So you have to factor that as far as a cost, because I knew we would have high winds here. So I did 42 posts. I drove in the ground, drove in the ground by hand, or wanted to use my tractor. I cheated a bit. But in any case, you have to do that. Now, again, if you live in an area where you don't have high winds, you might just need to put a couple stakes on each end, each corner, because you don't have anything trying to lift it.
Right.
Now, with it being so long, this greenhouse, we're speaking, 12 by 80, is 12 feet wide, so it's not very big. You have 2 beds on the outside, and you have 1 in the middle, and you have 2 walkways. That's pretty much what you can get out of that. It's not the height profile is around 7 feet, so it's not, you're not sticking 15 feet in the air. So again, the bigger you go with greenhouses in general, and conditions, of course, it will cost more because you need to add that support, and it hasn't blown away. And the final thing I'll comment as far as greenhouses go as basics is you want to get yourself some good plastic.
Yeah,
now,
exactly right.
That's kind of, I mean, you can go, like, you can do your hoops, you can do your whole deal, and you can go to Home Depot and you can buy regular 5 or whatever mil plastic.
And it cracks. It cracks.
In the winter times, it cracks. In the summertime, it stretches. And in the main issue with greenhouse plastic is your UV treatment. Yeah. Because if you have, like, even containers, like plant containers or shopping bags out in the sun for half a season, you go to pick them up, they fall apart in your hands. Yeah. Because they're not made to live outside. Yeah. UV treated plastic. Some plastics, the UV treatment is a spray that's sprayed on one side. Some of it's kind of impregnated when they mix the plastic. Like, there are tons of different types, but when you go to skin your greenhouse and you want to use your plastic, you want to make sure you get a quality greenhouse plastic. Mm-hmm. Now, you can get real thick stuff, and that might be overkill. So the easiest thing to do is, again, find a company that deals with greenhouse plastic, call them up and say, hey, this is what I have. These are my conditions. What do you recommend? Yeah. And I guess the last thing with the plastic is, depending on where you live, like I said, where I'm at, I'm pretty open. So there's nothing hanging above the greenhouses. So I never have to worry about trees falling on it, branches falling on it. Now, this goes more for placement of a greenhouse. Don't put it under a tree. If you can help it, don't put it under a tree. Or if it's a tree, make it, a spruce tree, or not like a deciduous tree that's going to lose its leaves, and that's a lot more kind of fragile in a sense than a conifer, like a spruce or a pine. You don't have enough, like, they have big branches. They don't have little ones that can fall everywhere. Because you can spend $2,000 on a good greenhouse and you stick it somewhere where it shouldn't go. Yeah. And then the next year you're having to tape up plastic or even replace it. And, if you get big enough holes in your plastic and the wind catches it, it can just tear it to pieces. Yeah. And that's, a lot of that goes into your planning more so than what type of plastic you use. But as far as, like, overall greenhouses, there's a couple factors how I built. One is, get the right plastic, use the right type of hoops and hardware to secure it. And lastly is put it in a good location. East-west is best because that's the way the sun goes. If you can't do east-west, well, then do it whatever way you can do it. As far as running the long side,
Right.
If you have 12 by 12 or 12 by 20, where it's basically a square, not a long tube, then it doesn't really matter as much. But that's just the way you kind of do it to avoid shading issues mostly.
Right.
And it gets your as much kind of UV light through it. That way, when your hoops are bent, kind of, if you can picture it parallel to the sun rather than vertically. It's just kind of the way it works. I mean, again, this is all my opinion. I'm no expert, but that's how I've always seen greenhouses done. You run them the way the sun goes, if at all possible. And the last thing is try to put it on flat ground. None of mine are on flat ground. You can see from the videos. Each greenhouse that I put up from one end to the other is probably a 6 to 8 inch drop, like when you walk in. But so the only thing you really have to compensate is when your poles you're putting in the ground, the ones on the far end or your lower end, you have to just make them higher so they are even. Or close to it. Because if it's kind of crooked like this, then you're just inviting problems, and then your strength from the hoops kind of go away because it's not just the way it kind of just the way it works. I guess it would be the easy way to say it. So like you can spend a lot of money for greenhouses, or you can spend a little money. It kind of depends on what your location is and what your situation is and what you want to get out of it, basically.
Well, and I think it also depends on your expertise. If you're a beginning gardener and you've never gardened, there's not really a huge point to having a greenhouse because you don't even know anything about your soil yet. And I got my first greenhouse. I built it after I'd been gardening for 5 years, and it had just got to a point where I needed to move on to the next step. I wanted to be serious about my early garden. But before that, it wouldn't have really helped me much. And the other thing is, if you build your greenhouse too small, then your plants out, like if you have like a little 8x6 greenhouse, that does you absolutely no good except with seedlings, because you can't really plant anything. There's no room for it to grow. And so if you're going to do a greenhouse, make it big enough you can put your whole garden in it if you need to.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it is kind of your budget. You know, if you have $5,000 to spend, we'll build a $5,000 greenhouse. But if you only have $1,000, $800, $500, and that's what your limit is, well then, you know, you're kind of stuck. Like your variables is the cost. Now mine necessarily wasn't the cost, so to speak. Even though it was quite expensive, I kind of had an idea the space it was going to go and what I wanted to do with it as the years progressed. Now, like in 2014 season, I grew tomatoes inside there. I grew peppers in there. And the problem there is the tomatoes grew 7 foot by mid-August, and they outgrew it. And and last year I was hurt during when the prime time was to string them to your top purlin. So a lot of them were laid on the ground, but you had 7 foot vines by the end of the season. Yeah. So this year I didn't grow tomatoes in the long greenhouse. I grew it in the other greenhouse, which if you watch the videos from when I built the first one to the second one, how much of an upgrade it was. And I mean, you're talking a lot of money upgrade as well, but from what it had to what it does have now, it's a lot favorable for things like tomatoes. They can grow 9 feet high before they have to start coming down. And that's a lot. That's 2 extra feet of growing space, which they'll grow 2 feet in a month, if not more, depending on your season. And
so with this with the infrastructure that you're putting in, you said last year it was about 3,000 that you were able to make gross from your market garden. So what do you do as your 9 to 5 to make money? Because I mean, it's obvious this could grow into a livelihood, but at this point, as far as your day-to-day grind and all, what time frame are you working on your garden, and what time frame are you working on your regular job?
Well, luckily, my wife and I we work at the farm. I don't have an alternate or another job during the week. Now, I like the main focus of the farm originally was horses. You know, we take care of the horses. We do boarding. My wife teaches lessons, the whole deal. So my kind of first thing of the day, if it's my day for that, is to feed the horses, clean the barn, give hay, water, the whole deal. And once that's kind of done, I do things like in the springtime or early summer. Right now, I've been doing a lot of hay. I put up probably close to 800 bales of hay, and most of it I do myself. 800 bales of hay up into our hay loft, so that was spread out over a number of different days. And I maintain the property. We have 25 acres. What we're actually using right now is probably closer to maybe 8 to 10. What's usable at the moment, but you know, you can't cut all that grass in a day. So you cut some this day, you cut some that day, and just general maintenance, fence repairs, this and that. And early on, when we first moved in here, there was a lot more work to do than there is now. Like, we're getting to a point now where we have a couple projects on the go or wanting to do. We're waiting for either some income to come in or the time or what have you. But how I kind of was able to do the market or grow for market is the year that I wanted to do it, I kind of talked to my wife about it. I said, you know what, if I want to do this market business, I need to devote a lot more time. And most of the time is in the springtime. Doing your seedlings, prepping your beds, cleaning your beds or your garden if you didn't clean it the fall before, planting seeds, putting up your netting, putting down plastic, irrigation, whatever. And it kind of once a lot of some of the early stuff is done, then you don't do it again. Like once I lay my plastic in the garden, I don't touch it until November when I pull it all up. But it's a lot of stuff to do in the spring. And so the way I kind of, you know, she said, yeah, that's fine as long as you get done what we need to do here. But fortunately, as the market has grown, as the seasons have grown, the projects and the work here hasn't grown. It's kind of went the other way, which allows me a lot more time. There are some days right now we're in the beginning of July, so pretty much everything's planted. And when I want to water the one greenhouse, I go down, I turn a knob on, and I check it in an hour. That's how I water it. The other greenhouse, the tall one, I set the timer for 30 minutes, and I check it after 30 minutes to make sure it went off. You know, if you're hand watering things, that takes a lot longer.
Right.
If you don't have drip irrigation in your garden, that takes a lot of hand watering. And I'm talking hand watering when you're not having consistent rain. Up in Ontario here, we're in, I don't know if it's an official drought, but we haven't had a decent rain since May. So the grasses are drying up. If I wouldn't be watering the garden, I probably would have a third of what's actually growing in there. Same thing with the greenhouses. And luckily we're on a well, so we have a deep well, so I could water everything kind of in the same day. People that are on city water, that's costing a lot of money to water. I mean, something the size that I have now. So as far as your question is, you know, horses, that's the main thing in the property. The market is the second thing. But as the years have gone on, I've gotten smarter as far as how to make things take less time. And usually when things take less time, they cost more money.
Right. And that is the trade-off, isn't it?
That is a trade-off. However, also with it costing more money, you then get more free time.
Right.
So there are trade-offs or pros and cons of each thing. Not to jump ahead too much, but this is the first year in both greenhouses I put in pretty much 90% drip irrigation, which is a lot of work in the spring to get it laid out, get your plants put where they're supposed to go, this and that. But when they're done, as I mentioned a minute ago, the long greenhouse, I go down there, hook a hose, or the hose is hooked up to the tap or the like the filter thing. I turn it on and I check it in an hour, and everything's watered in an hour. And all I got to do is walk down, turn it on, and walk back. Yeah. You know, so I've the trade-off of spending more money is to give me more time, and also it saves your body in a sense. Yeah. So you have to have trade-offs. If you can't afford big drip irrigation, then don't do it. There's, you know, don't do it. If what works for you works, then just do it. If you have a smaller garden, even if something like, you know, say 1/8 of an acre, say 50 by 50, you can hand water that. Like, it's not a huge plot. It's when you start doing tons of crazy things, you know, big rows of potatoes or sweet corn and pumpkins and things that really take up a lot of space and they need a lot of maintenance. And some things, in a sense, you're saving money, but you're using a lot more time and you're using a lot more of you know, physical body, especially when it's hot. Yeah. And here lately, as I said, in Ontario, we're pretty much in a drought, and it's been in the 80s, which may not seem hot, but it's quite warm, 80s to 90 degree here almost every day for the past, number of weeks. So you're trying to be out there in your garden watering that, and those temperatures, you have to do it in the morning, you got to do it at night because it just makes it so hot. So luckily, turn a couple switches on, check it, this and that. That's how I water. So I guess getting back to your original question is, when the horse chores are done, then I do the gardening chores, which at the moment, as I said, there isn't very many. Yeah. I'm not a big fan of weeding, as you can see in videos of years past, but because that's a lot of labor intensive, and I'm not, it's not costing me any money to do it, but I haven't necessarily found decreased yields of certain things because of not weeding or because of not this. So if I don't need to do it, I don't do it.
Right.
That's kind of how my kind of years have progressed to 2016.
Well, and that's what we found this year is that we just have our 12 by 24 greenhouse, but I planted it intensively. I was hand watering every day. It was taking me 2 hours between the 3 gardens that we have. We have 2 outside gardens and then the greenhouse garden. And I was watering and not very effectively. Things weren't getting the water they needed. And I had other things that were like, oh, I also have to fertilize. Oh, I also have to harvest. Oh, I also have to thin. And because I was spending so much time watering, I wasn't getting to these other really important things. And so it was stunting the growth of my plants. I had kids that needed me in the morning. When you work from home, you're kind of available to your kids. You're available to your spouse. You have animals that need you. And so for me, in order to really feel like, let's do this as if we were going to eat out of it. Let's just do it and have a knob. And I put in soaker hoses because I wanted something I could move. I didn't know if it was going to work. And so I wanted something that was a standard length that I could loop back on itself. Rather, I want to put in drip lines that are set up standard. But for now, I'm like, if I get soaker hoses, I can move them to the outside garden. If they don't work in the greenhouse, I just wanted something standard. And we did it and it works. And the amount of brain power and the amount of physical exhaustion that I had from trying to be out in that hot sun in that hot greenhouse just kind of opened the world up to just mechanize it, Yeah.
Yeah. It like gardens in general, it's kind of, there's 2 types in a sense. You grow stuff for yourself or you grow stuff for others, which in turn either means, giving away or selling. And as you just kind of mentioned, as far as intensive plantings and weeding and thinning and all that, because you wanted to get the best stuff for yourself and your family or your friends. I, on the other hand, I'm not growing for myself. So the methods of growing are easier. To me, I'd rather plant 100 feet of beans and let the weeds grow than plant 30 feet and weed them to get the same amount out of. Yeah. So like if I would be, we consider an intensive gardener where you're on everything every day, weeding every day, thinning, I would have tons more product, but you're talking hours and hours a day, literally a day to do, you say you do these couple of beds this day. Well, there's an hour, here's an hour, and it adds up. And sometimes I feel it can get very overwhelming. If you kind of deal with anxiety or things like that, seeing something that has I take it back to like laundry. If you do a load of laundry, you fold it, it's not that bad. But if you do a load of laundry every day for 5 days and then you have 5 loads to fold at the end of the week, it's like, geez, how am I ever going to get this done? And at the end of the day, it takes the same amount of time, but it's your mind that really makes it seem like it takes longer, or it can bring you down. And I know a lot of people garden and do, even if you have like a 10 by 10 little space or with containers on your porch, whatever, a lot of people use that for therapy in a sense. It's something where it's like, I'm taking care of this. It's not an animal or a pet that if it dies, it's a problem, Right. And but if you plant a couple of tomato plants or some lettuce, and it's really kind of, as I said, what you want to get out of it, and not to jump too much into it, but I sold a lot of seedlings this year at the market, and some people come up to me and they ask kind of how big I grow, and they kind of want the whole spiel about what I do, and I give it to them in so many words. And you have some people that buy 2 tomato plants, pepper plant, this, that, the other thing, and they say, I just have a small garden, that's enough for me and my husband or me and the family, whatever. And then you have some people that come and buy 2 flats, 30 some plants. And I don't necessarily ask them what they're doing with them all, because it's none of my business. It's a sale's a sale. But I kind of say, you know, hey, that's a lot of peppers. That's a lot of this. And they say, yeah, I grow and I give some to my neighbors up the street, or my parents up the street, or blah, blah, blah up the street. So they're doing it not just for themselves, but for someone else. And that's kind of the dynamic early spring at the market anyway, as far as when people are buying things from me and other people to then plant to give to someone else. Because you get a huge mix of people that buy for themselves, buy exclusively for somebody else because they can't drive or whatever the reason, or a mixture of both, or they give stuff to the food bank. And that's something that I will be doing once my products start coming in abundance. I give to the food bank as well. You know, so it's kind of you get what you put in. If you want a little garden and that's all you can take care of, that's fine. If you want to have 10 acres of zucchini plants, well, then go ahead and do that. Yeah. But you have to have, in a sense, you have to have a purpose for what you're doing. And we're going back to 2011 now, is there are videos that I posted, I know on my channel, I think of actually 2010, before I even had the farm. I had seed packets everywhere, and I had made a video of what I'm planting, and I didn't even have the property yet. So, you know, I was like the ambition or whatever word you want to use, it was so far ahead of where I should have been. Like, I remember the first year I went out and bought so many tomato plants and pepper plants, like, I don't know, hundreds of dollars from like Home Depot.
Right?
And there's videos of that. And again, not to kind of jump over it there, but if you watch seed videos from like 2011, I have like peppers that are like this tall and tomatoes that are 2 feet. And I'm like, this is so awesome and this is great. And there's weeds everywhere. But you know what? If you watch the videos, you see I was happy, mostly happy. And where you can get into trouble, now, not leading this into another question, but where you can get into trouble is don't do more than what you can do physically, money-wise, or anything. And don't, my wife says this to me all the time. She says, don't set your sights above what you can meet, because if you don't meet it, then you're going to be upset.
Right. And
in the example there is like I was, you know, talking to her the other week about, again, the zucchini plants. I planted 70 or so zucchini plants, green and yellow zucchini, summer squash, and the bug issue them having is wiped out probably 20 to 30 of them, so 40%. And like I went to, you know, talk to her about it, and just kind of, she's not into gardening or anything, but she kind of listens when I talk sometimes about it. And she's like, you know what, don't look about what you lost, just kind of go with what you got. And it's very true, because if you get frustrated, then it's like you don't want to do it the next year. And there have been points this year especially where, whether it be stuff isn't growing well, stuff isn't selling well, there's too much competition at the market for XYZ product, it's like, geez, maybe I should just bake bread for the market next year. You know, right. in something like that where you're not dependent on the weather or on anything. And that's another thing, not necessarily off the same question, but if you do something like a market, real quickly, is growing product is the hardest thing you can do as a vendor. You can bake, if you want to do baked goods, well, you're not dependent on the weather. It doesn't matter what the weather's doing. It doesn't, you know, you make your own time, doesn't matter what the sun, you know, time you bake when you want to bake. You can freeze things, for example, and you're doing everything in a controlled environment. The only thing that's controlling everything is you. Same thing if you're making clothing or jewelry or animal toys or anything that doesn't have to do with the environment is easier. Now, the trade-off real quickly, that is the money. Roughly, you know, kind of overall, the first week of the market, now, you know, I'm not that I'm, you know, making tons of money, but the first week of the market, I made it over $800 in 6 hours. And that was, I was like, at the end of the day, when I counted up, when I got home, I was very surprised. And that goes to show that the person that was selling baked goods next to me, they didn't make $800. Right. So again, there's trade-offs. If you want to do something, I mean, this is just in general in life. If you want to bake bread, well, that's not very difficult, but you get a loaf of bread. If you want to plant one tomato plant, you're going to get many, many tomatoes out of it. You're going to get more, but it requires a little bit more work. So again, going back to the beginning with this is you get what you put in, whether it be money, time, you know, the love of it or the need or the necessity of it. You get what you put in, but if you set yourself up for failure, then you're going to fail in some sense of the word.
Yeah.
Usually,
Well, and
mostly, mostly you do.
It's kind of like gambling. When you're a gardener, you have the rush of the gambler just a little bit, because you're right. You're not in control of the pests. You're not in control of the weather. You might get sick a little bit, like you said with your back problems. Something unexpected might happen, and yet sometimes it doesn't matter. Everything still succeeds, and you just feel so happy and glorious. And it doesn't matter that the weeds came in. You still got a good harvest. But you do have the years where you put everything into it and everything should have happened perfectly, and then it didn't. And I find that kind of thing, if I diversify so that, like, for instance, we had 2 years where we didn't plant a garden because we found out our soil was poisonous. And instead I focused on planting fruit trees. Am I still gardening? Yes, I'm still gardening. I was gardening for results that I would see 10 years in the future, but I was still doing something. And those may have been years that, in fact, I think those were also years that we had stock full freezers full of pork and full of beef cow. I mean, we had other things that we've turned our attention to in the years that we just knew that we were going to fail if we pushed it too hard. And so instead we diversified so that we felt like we were succeeding at something.
Yeah, it's very tough. And like the under the umbrella of a farmer, I mean, you can grow flowers and you're considered a farmer. You can grow animals for food or for eggs. I have 21 chickens that I have for eggs. You know, and you can grow produce and this and that, or herbs or whatever, and you're under that farmer umbrella. And some people don't like that term. If you grow flowers, you're not a farmer. People say you're not a farmer. Well, okay, fine. You know, but you have struggles. But then when you have a good season or a good egg crop or whatever, it's like, wow, what I'm doing is actually paying off in some sense of the word, and it makes up for, you know, the year before. And I mean, as far as with gardening, for me, since I'm doing markets and this whole deal, I've had countless people ask me, you know, why don't you do this market? It's twice as big. Why don't you do this? Why don't you do a CSA? Which I thought about doing many times. And different things like that. And it's like, you know what? I got to stay grounded with what I have. And, you know, I set a limit for myself as far as the size of my garden plot. And I've cheated a little bit because I made it bigger this year. But in general, I have a finite amount of space. Even though I said earlier 25 acres, well, I have 10 acres to grow whatever. But on a normal year, it's swampy. It's underwater. There's no condition to grow on where you're going to get a consistent crop. You know, so I'm limited with that. And I'm in a position where I'm not necessarily limited with finances too much. But if I'm not making a goal, like last year, as I said, I made 3,000 to 4,000. That might have been around, I'd say maybe 3,000. I had a goal last year of whatever I had. If I make this amount of money, the rest is gravy, as they say. The rest is good. This year, until I hit 3,000 or 4,000, I'm still in the hole in my mind. And it's just, that's why, as far as like limiting yourself, you know, if you have the ambition to have greenhouses and you can't afford them, or you're like, it's too much, don't do it. Don't do it. Save up. You know, the internet right now is such a great place. I mean, it's a very terrible place for bad information, but it's a very good place for good information, easy information. YouTube, for example, you know, you go on there, again, we're talking about greenhouses or gardening, or if you're like, well, how do I grow a basil plant? We go on YouTube, you find 1,000 results. Of that 1,000, you might have a couple hundred that are terrible, but you have some that are really good, and it says, okay, it's doable. This year, you know, for herbs, I used to buy plugs from a herb supplier. I bought a couple plugs this year, rosemary and sage, but like the basil and chives and cilantro, parsley, I grew all of them from seed. I'm thinking, well, how hard can it be? And I remembered in my head that I tried to do it a few years prior, and I got terrible results. I'm like, okay, well, maybe I'm actually going to read the seed packet this time instead. Maybe and I mean, you get into like a groove where I don't read things anymore, because I kind of like, seedlings is like probably the best thing that I do. Unfortunately, there's about a 4-week window of the whole year where that matters at all, as far as selling or for yourself. you don't want to, you can't have tomato seedlings for sale in August because that means nothing. You'll make zero money or you won't get a crop, you know, but it's kind of like, I know what I'm good at, but you still have to expand. And with the herbs, I tried to grow from seed and I had tremendous results and the amount of money that it saved. And that even kind of brings it into the whole thing about, you know, getting down on yourself or the anxiety or thinking you can't do it, so you don't do it. I didn't think I could grow herbs, but you know what? I have my grow room set up. I have videos on that. I did a completely new setup with my grow rooms, 2 grow rooms, and I had phenomenal results with herbs, with anything in there. And there's videos, some roughly, of that from this past early, you know, the early part of the spring, March or April or what have you. And it's like you always are improving. This year I knew I could grow herbs. Well, guess what I'm going to grow next year? 3 times as many herbs, right? Because I kind of know how to do it. And this kind of this whole kind of talk tonight, it all wraps up into one thing in the sense of you're always learning as a gardener. You're always learning as a farmer. My hay guy up the street, he's probably 70-some years old. He does hay. He does canola. He does tons of you know, field crops. But we get our hay from him. And he's learning every year how to read the year. He's still cutting first, for example, he's still cutting first cut hay, and we're in July. And usually that should have been done before. And he said, you know what, I'm waiting more because our second cut, if we even get one, is not going to be very good. So let the hay get a little long. You know, so he's learning every year. And when you're doing something like gardening, farming, what have you, you have to learn, because the biggest thing with growing is with climate change and just uncertainty how your springs and your summers go, you can get really discouraged. As I mentioned earlier, I think I mentioned how I lost so many seedlings because it got cold in the end of May and into the beginning of June. And, you know, back in the 90s or pre-1995 or so, you had a normal winter, you had normal spring, you had normal summer. And it got cold, it got warm, everything did slowly. Now it's back and forth, back. And this is across the globe, not just in United States or Canada. It's globally. And I mean, I can't speak for over there. I've never been there to grow anything. But here, in 5 years, weather patterns have changed that much. So as far as a farmer, a grower, producer, what have you, it's very challenging. So that goes back to what I said before, is do what you know. If you're good at growing tomatoes, guess what? Grow tomatoes. Don't try to grow peppers, or grow a few peppers. Don't try to grow 100 peppers, grow 5 or 10 and see what happens. And I guess kind of to end this part of the segment, I guess, is my biggest thing that I don't like about what I do is I have to wait a whole year until February rolls around next year, March, till I can start planning for the year. Right. And it's funny because before I had the first plant in the ground this year outside, which would have been end of May, I was already planning how I'm going to do it different next year. But the time has passed. Say it's June 1st. Well, it needed to be May 1st where I could make adjustments. So now I got to wait 11 months. And, you know, we're in July now. So March is what? 8 months away, 9 months. So it's not a full year, but I have to wait a year until I can make adjustments. And again, this goes back to the internet. You watch YouTube videos on someone doing XYZ thing. You're like, man, I should do that. And my whole thing is about weed barrier. I'll cover that hopefully in a video at some point this year. It's like, man, if I should do weed barrier like this guy does it, I'd even have less problems with weeds and things would be so much better. But as of July, what is it now, 6th or 8th, whatever it is today, I can't do that. I can't implement that. It's too late in the season to change things. And again, it's everything goes back to how difficult it can be, but it can also be fun.
Well, and you were showing that notebook before.
Yeah.
That you were talking about that you took to market. And I found 8 years ago when I started doing all the farming and everything, is that I started these 3-ring binders. Because I found that I would write things down and then I would relearn it and find that it was wrong. And so I would just take my pages out and rewrite it and say, well, what I actually learned this year was that, no, that's not the case. This thing that I tweaked, this worked even better. And so by having some kind, if you don't keep records, if you don't write down, this is what I did wrong last year, and this is how I'm going to fix it this year. By the time, like you said, by the time May comes around, you don't remember what the details of it were. And you don't remember what your goals were and why you were going to change it, and the details of why you didn't like this certain plant and you want to plant these other plants.
Exactly.
And so without a planner that says, this is what I'm doing in the front pasture next year, don't forget.
Looking at your book, you're way ahead of anything.
It's because I'm brainless.
I keep records of what I sell at the market, only so at the end of the season I'll make a spreadsheet and have everything listed of what weeks I sold what, and then at the end I'll have a total, and I can compare that to last year's total as far as tomato plants or tomato quarts or whatever. And every year I say to myself, you know what, I'm going to take better records, just as you said, just when you're doing seeding. And I did. I had spreadsheets. They're actually down in my grow room, and they've been down there since April. For when I seeded things, I wrote down the variety, how many, this, that, the other thing, typed it all up, the whole deal. But then eventually I get to the point where I'm like, well, I seeded 100 tomatoes, 100 tomato cells, but there's more than one good tomato in there, so now I'm going to have 200 tomatoes. And then you forget to kind of put this down, because it's almost harder to keep track, because it's like you say you plant 100 tomatoes, but you actually planted 120. So you have to then rechange it's like really keep notes that way. And my biggest thing was when I started seedlings, seeds for the garden, for the market, for myself, the year previous. Because for someone like me who's doing the market, is early is key. If you have lettuce or beets before anybody else, guess what? You're going to make money on those solely that week. And as a home gardener, you don't have to have those issues, because it's like if you plant beets, when they come, they come. It's not like, oh, I should have had beets 2 weeks ago. It doesn't really matter, you know. Right. But still, keeping records, regardless of how small of an operation you have, how big an operation you have, or what your operation entails. I mean, for me, again, it's just gardening. But you have lots of different types of animals, and they have their own types of care, their own types of pens. And like, to me, that's harder than what I do, because I have like the chicken pen, and that's been the same for a few years, and they get fed and watered the same way every day, collect the eggs. But the garden changes, you know, but it's a lot easier. But going back to note taking in general, I found the like kind of computers, the internet is very helpful for those of you that do Facebook or even YouTube, for instance, that make videos, even if you're just private videos for yourself, or you make them with your digital camera just for yourself or your phone. Is you look at them the next year. I do it every season. At the next spring or next winter or whatever, I'll look at videos that I made in this spring that said how many I did this, how many did that, and then look at my notes, what I sold, and then you adjust. And it's the same principle if you're a home gardener. As you ate 5 types of tomatoes, if you didn't like one type, well, then replace it with something else. But you have a note saying, I didn't like this orange tomato, it wasn't very good. So then you have that note. You don't have to then think when February rolls around, oh yeah, there was a tomato out of those 5 I didn't like, but I don't remember which one it was. So guess what? You're going to plant the same 5, and then you're still going to have the same results. You know, but if you take notes in some capacity, whether it's video notes, whether you use your phone and you put a note or an email to yourself, or even on paper, something that when you read it, it makes sense for like the next season. And if you have animals, you have seasons, but you don't have seasons because you have them all the time. But you adjust them from summer to winter care, or to rain, stuff like that. And that's something I have no experience with. The horses go outside regardless if it's raining or if it's snowing or whatever. The chickens, they choose themselves if they want to go outside if it's raining or snowing. That's their choice. If not, they stay in the coop. But that's their choice. But by note taking in general, even the 3 years again that I'm doing markets, it's really helped me a lot. And because I can look back at videos or notes or on my phone, pictures. Most of it this year was pictures, because if you have smartphones or Facebook, whatever, you get reminders. Oh, this is what happened last year. Well, you look at it, and you say, oh, okay, I did tomatoes last year. This is what I did. Well, there you go. There's your information. So kind of social media is a good way to have personal information for yourself that doesn't necessarily concern anybody else, but you post it because that's the way you got to do it. You know, and if you don't take notes and that's not the way you do it, that's fine too. That keeps things interesting, but you also kind of set yourself up for not failure, but you could be kind of I don't know what the word is, a little upset if you plant the same thing year after year, even though it doesn't do good. I do that myself. I say, you know what, last year the X thing didn't do well, but guess what? This year is gonna. And my thing is sweet corn. Every year I try to go sweet corn. And it gets this tall, and then it does nothing. And every year for the past 5 years, it gets that tall. Excuse me, it does nothing, and I till it under. Never works. And for me, I'm happy when I see people come to the market week after week buying from me, saying, "Hey, your stuff is great." That's where I get it from. The money's a bonus, you know, that's good too. But week after week, people come to me. Right now, again, I said I'm doing mixed greens, my mixed greens bags. And there have been times last week, not to take too much time now, last week someone came and this lady, and I thought when people say, you know what, I had that bag, the first thing I'm thinking is, uh-oh, they didn't like it. Well, that's never had the case. This lady came and she said, you know what, this is the best thing I've ever had. It lasts for 2 weeks, or it lasts for a week or whatever. Everything's so fresh and this. And she was going on for probably 20 seconds, you know, in real time. And I'm sitting there thinking, I appreciate it. And there are other people around listening to that. And not that I never knew her, I didn't even recognize her from the week before. But it's just when people come and say, you know, hey, your seedlings that I'm growing are this big and they're putting on peppers. I like to hear that because then I know I'm doing a good job outside of my little bubble. You said, oh, yeah, you know what, these cucumbers are garbage. Well, guess what? Next year, try something different.
Right.
You know, I mean, I guess thankfully, no one at the market so far has told me any of my stuff tastes like trash. But you know, I have had people that give me constructive criticism saying, yeah, these were a little bitter. And I said, you know what, I know why. These were like this. And I say, I know why. But 95% of the stuff is positive. And overall, I mean, kind of as a whole again, that's what keeps me doing what I'm doing.
Well, and it's like the year that we didn't grow gardens, we grew fruit trees because I knew there was something wrong with my soil and I wasn't going to be able to grow a garden. I might as well grow something that I knew would make it. And so I agree. I think the experience itself is really powerful of gardening or farming. Just doing things outside and being in the sunshine is so healthy.
Doing kind of what I do, what you do, it can be rewarding. It's a lot of hard work. Some days you don't want to do it. You don't feel it's worth it. I mean, especially you dealing with animals and stuff in the wintertime. I luckily only have the chickens and the chickens and the horses to deal with in the wintertime. I don't have tons of other animals that need to be milked or this, that, the whole thing. So I actually get off quite easy compared to someone like you or other people that have livestock, you know, but it keeps you going. And and I think another thing with kind of what we do, you know, you and I here is every day is different.
Right. You're never bored. You're really tired, but you're never bored.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, so, I mean, do what you do, I guess, is the end of the day here. I mean, do what you want to do. Don't get discouraged too much. I'm very discouraged, or have been, with these bugs because I never had them before. But you know what? The bugs are having issues. But this year, my lettuce and my greens did exceptionally well. So there's, I guess, the trade-off.
Exactly. Well, I think we have run out of time. It is 8:30 here.
Like, it's been fun.
It has been fun, and thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Everybody go check out the Ontario Gardener. He has amazing videos on his channel. He has amazing Instagram photos. I haven't seen you on Facebook yet because I'm not on Facebook very much, but Cashes for Life is his Instagram.
Yep.
And
the Eagle Valley Produce on Facebook.
Okay. Eagle
Valley Produce.
Eagle Valley Produce. Okay. So thanks for checking in, and we'll talk to you later.